Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to uncovering the strategies and insights that drive innovative, disruptive businesses. Join us as we explore the mindsets, cultures, and solutions powering the next generation of industry leaders and creative trailblazers. Whether you're seeking to inject new life into your organization or spark transformative growth, the Visionary Chronicles is your guide to executable, cutting-edge business strategy. Hello, welcome to the Visionary Chronicles. Again, appreciate your time. Thanks for being with me today. This is going to be a good one today, a little longer, but I think probably, I would say, one of the most valuable podcasts to apply to your day-to-day in your business, life, or whatever you may need it for. It is called Built to Last, the 5 Pillars to Creating a Resilient Business. And I guarantee you, I went into more detail on this podcast, so I'm going to give you some not only practical advice, but also advice from the new book that I just wrote. First was The Visionary Brand, the second being The Visionary Leader. So I got a lot of not only practical advice, but good advice for you as to what makes a visionary brand and a visionary leader, and also decades of experience with being iconic brands. And I felt like I wanted to kind of really dig in on this one because it's a question that I get asked many times because of what we've gone through over the last few decades, and most recently COVID. And it really takes resilience for you to survive and thrive through these types of climate issues that we have or political issues that we may have. So welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, the podcast where we explore what it truly takes to create businesses that don't just survive, but thrive through the decades of change, challenge, and uncertainty. And it certainly applies to what we're talking about today. So let's take a deep dive into the fundamental principles. And this is an interesting one, an interesting stat that maybe some of you know, but I'm guaranteeing you probably a majority of you don't know, is we're going to dive deep into the fundamental principles that separate companies that endure and those that fade away. And we've always heard the principle of 80% of companies fail in the first 5 years, the other 80% fail in the next 5. So in a world where we average a lifespan of a Fortune 500 company, not just a general company, has dropped from 61 years in 1958 to just 18 years today. So understanding resilience, it really isn't something that you would like to have. It's something that you need to have. It's essential for any business leader who wants to create a lasting impact in our world and actually thrive and survive in our world. So today we're going to talk about resilience. And resilience in business isn't about, let's say, luck or timing, though both certainly over time play a role. I'm not doubting that. It's about intentional design, adaptive thinking, and building systems that can bend without breaking. Today we'll explore some of those characteristics that make businesses what I'll call a word, maybe I'm making this up, look at the dictionary, antifragile, let's call it. Examine real-world studies of companies that have weathered multiple storms and provide you with some actionable strategies. And I say actionable, I'm going to give you some bullet points on these 5 pillars of business resilience that I found extremely valuable. They've been applied to the brands that I've worked with directly, brands that I work with at Liquid Mind, and brands that I profiled in the Visionary Brand, my first book. And so we'll talk about those companies and how they've weathered these multiple storms, not just one, multiple, and provide you with some actionable strategies you can implement immediately. And I find that's the practical advice that you're going to get from the Visionary Chronicles. What we talk about is things you can apply immediately to your business and your organization. So let's get right to it because this is going to be a little longer, so bear with me here, but I guarantee you at the end you're going to find it extremely valuable for your business in implementing this resilience, what I call quotient of business resistance. So it's 5 pillars of business resilience. And again, there's many more, but I just found these to be the most valuable. The first pillar is financial fortress, I call it. And this is a strong financial management that forms the bedrock, what I call this foundation of any resilient business. People talk about this, but not a lot of people do it. This goes far beyond just simply turning a profit. It's about creating multiple layers, and many businesses forget about this, and almost every CFO or financial manager or leader I talk with is they always talk about cash flow. And one thing that you need to keep in mind as you're running and building your business is, yes, cash flow is important, but ensuring that you're layering this cash flow with many and multiple ways of financing your ongoing business. So when we talk about the financial security, we want layers of financial security that can absorb unexpected shocks and capitalize on opportunities when competitors are struggling. And that's an interesting one. When I pen this up on the board, they go, one of them, this most recent, because I'll give you an example here, is that when we talk about COVID, one thing that people never talked about, people were talking about conserving cash, but those that were aggressively going after their competitors and finding opportunities in a weak environment that had the cash and ability to acquire are the ones today you see coming out the back end extremely successful, and all the better for COVID. I'm not saying COVID was good, but I'm just saying you need to be prepared, and it's a great example of being prepared and finding a way to be successful coming out the back end. So you capitalize on opportunities when competitors are struggling. And there's companies like Berkshire Hathaway and Apple have demonstrated this power of maintaining substantial cash reserves. And I'm not saying you're Berkshire Hathaway, but what we can take away from is the Warren Buffett model of conserving cash for a rainy day, number one. Number two, a rainy day for others, that you can go out and acquire product that is currently depressed. So it's not a dead weight, but a strategic ammunition for uncertain times. So in addition to these pillars, what I'm also going to give you are some key strategies around that pillar. And here are key financial resilience strategies I want to talk about, and I'll give you a couple bullet points here. So things to ensure that you have in place for business resilience on pillar number one, the financial fortress, is maintain 6 to 12 months of operating expenses in readily accessible cash reserves, operating expenses, SG&A. And that's what you need to have as the overhead, because you can always have product. Many times people, almost every instance, have too much inventory, not enough inventory. So what you need to take care of is the overhead and the operating expenses on a 6 to 12 month level for operating expenses. So make sure you have that in cash reserves, number one. Number two is diversify revenue streams to reduce dependency on any single source. Now this goes towards when people talk about your portfolio. Think of your financial portfolio. You don't invest 100% of your money in bonds, and you don't invest 100% of your money in equities. Relative to your risk, you balance those out. So it's the same thing here with your company. Is that, yes, it may be an incremental revenue stream, and you may not have significant market share, but it could be a savior when one stream is cut off. You need another stream to be able to pursue revenue in order to fund your operations. And this could be a case of, let's just say with a consumer product company on apparel. You want to have retail distribution, you want to have D2C distribution, but you also want to have channel distribution such as golf. Maybe in the case of sports where you have football, baseball, basketball, you don't just have one sport, you've got multiple sports and multiple streams of opportunities. So if participation goes down, you can always balance that out with where the players are going to. So it's the same thing in your business. Number three is implement rolling forecasts that extend 18 to 24 months ahead. Number four is establish pre-negotiated credit lines before you need them. Not a lot of people do that. I find that this is predominantly with entrepreneurial companies. They'll be relying on a single funding mechanism when they haven't had other credit lines that they can put in place in case of an emergency. So do this pre-negotiated credit lines before you need them. Keep them in excess somewhere so you can access them when you need them. And number five is monitor cash flow weekly, not monthly or quarterly. Manage it weekly. And I'm not trying to be anal here, but it's really a case of being able to have a cursory look at something on a week-to-week basis. It doesn't take that much time as people may think. You have a financial manager for a reason. you want to make sure that they are looking at the key figures and numbers based on your current situation. And also, it gives them a little bit of insight on a short-term basis to find long-term needs. So make sure that you're doing that. You're currently going to do the monthly or quarterlies, but just make sure you're taking a look at your financials weekly. And that's cash flow financials. When I say financials, just clarify there, it's cash flow. And the next is build relationships with multiple financial institutions and investors. You want to have them in your back pocket, and you want to make sure that you just don't walk in cold to a banker. And you also want to make sure that you have somebody on your Rolodex or in your iPhone, whatever you want to call it, and be able to call them in case of need and funding. And they're going to be predominantly interested that you don't call them at the last minute in dire need, because they're going to smell blood. So you want to make sure that you have this monitoring cash flow weekly, not monthly or quarterly. You have other streams of revenue that become attractive to an investor, and that you have financial institutions that you've established a relationship with, that you haven't currently worked with, but you have a relationship with. And then the last in this is create scenario planning for best, worst, and most likely financial outcomes. And this becomes a stress test. And as much as people talk about stress tests, very few do them. So you would be head of the crowd if you were actually doing some type of stress test with your company, brand, service, whatever it happens to be, and put that in place. So if you have to flip a switch one day, reduce overhead, you know what your month-to-month cash flow needs are, and you can also define what those financial outcomes will be as a result of cuts that you may have to make or investments that you want to make in the future. So that's what I call the financial fortress pillar number one. Pillar number two is make sure that you have adaptive leadership and culture building. Extremely important. I'm so anal about culture. And any company that is resilient has had a empowered culture, I call it. And what it means is that you've got loyalty, you have passion with your team members through your leader who has had humility and offered up to their team the success of projects or things that you've done in the past that builds loyalty with them, and also builds resilience with them and the company as a brand to ensure that when things do come up, that they're on the boat with you riding the waves, not jumping out. So resilient businesses are led by visionaries who embrace risk rather than resist it, number one, and who cultivate organizational cultures that view challenges and opportunities for growth. This type of leadership doesn't emerge overnight, by the way. It emerges and it requires a conscious development of emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure. Not everybody can do that. And I get that. But you want to make sure that you're cultivating this culture before you need this culture to be enacted, because you want loyalty. You want people on the boat rowing with you, not people that are rowing against you and or jumping out of the boat altogether. And companies like Nike have reinvented themselves multiple times over their century plus history. And precisely because their leadership understood that adaptation isn't optional, it's a survival technique. And we'll talk about Nike in a minute here on a case study. So let me give you a full bullet points here you can implement with your company and brand as a leader of your company. And leadership resilient characteristics for culture building companies and brands. Number one is emotional breaks under pressure and uncertainty. Don't freak out under pressure. Have a calmness, and I always call it affectionately the duck principle. You see a duck on the water, it looks calm as can be underneath, it's paddling like crazy. So you want to make sure you have this emotional breaks under pressure and uncertainty. You got this calmness about you, so when people come in, they feel calm and feels like things are under control, even though they may not be. You need to be the face of calm in the middle of the storms. So, and the second is decisiveness, balance with flexibility and openness to new information. I always say, make a damn decision. It's better to make a bad decision than no decision at all. You're stalling the company. Make a decision. Decisiveness, balance with flexibility and openness to new information. So make a decision based on the information that you have at the time, but be open and flexible to the new information that's coming through, and also pivot if needed. Not to your destination, but it could be a switchback leadership I talk about, where you maneuver back and forth, and that's very common. When you're going towards your destination, you're going to hit these barriers. That's fine. Never lose sight of your destination, but just ensure that you're making decisive decisions that move you along the path to executing your vision. Number 3 is clear communication that maintains team morale during difficult periods. I've seen so many leaders, I call them ostrich leaders. And what they do is they put their head in the sand and pull it out when they hope everything's calm. The best leaders are the ones who stand in front of the boat when the storms are the strongest. And they lead the team when the storms are strongest. They have a clear insight as to what the next steps are. And they communicate clearly even if the news is bad. It's okay. The next is a long-term vision coupled with short-term tactical agility. And I say tactical agility because you need to be moving in the direction of what you're going to execute as a company, as a brand. You need tactical agility in the switchback leadership to reach your destination, but you need to have a long-term vision to achieve it. But you need to be tactical and agile as you move along that path to success. The next is willingness to make unpopular but necessary strategic pivots. Everybody gets pissed off when you want to make a change or do something. Maybe their project gets canceled because you have to cut the budget. Maybe you're moving on to something else that looks more promising. But you need to make those decisions even when unpopular. I've seen so many what I call, and affectionately, having played football in college, they always called them player coaches. And I said, well, I don't necessarily want a coach to be my friend. I want a coach to lead. And it's the same thing here. You got to make unpopular decisions. Every decision is not popular. So move on from them if you have to make a strategic pivot. But make a decision and be willing to make an unpopular decision. The next is investment in continuous learning and skill development for your team. You want the smartest team on the planet, not the one that you're afraid of taking your position. I always took pride in when my team moved up inside of my company or moved to another company. We're successful because people want our employees, because we empower our employees. The next is building and empowering strong leadership teams rather than operating as a sole decision maker with no humility. Have some damn humility when you're out there as a leader. When you're resilient as a leader and as a company and a brand, you have the most humble leaders in your industry. And people want to come work for you because you not only establish a vision, but you're also willing to share the credit as a brand and other people talk about it. And I find this a great example of don't talk about your great accomplishments. Have others talk about your great accomplishments. If you have to talk about your great accomplishments and nobody else is saying anything, they're effectively not great accomplishments. So stop talking about them. The next is pillar 3, market intelligence and consumer focus. Understanding your market isn't let's say this one-time experience. It's an ongoing discipline that requires attention and investment, and not a lot of company or brands want to do it. Resilient businesses maintain intimate knowledge of their customers' evolving needs, competitive landscape shifts, broader market trends that could impact their industry. And that's a mouthful, but I can tell you, if you're going to be successful and generational and resilient as a brand, you need to have all these and excel at each one of these on a day-to-day basis inside of your company in order for you to be successful and generational and have an impact in your industry and to be disruptive. So this intelligence gathering enables proactive rather than reactive strategies, and that's key. I was always one to want to be responding, not reacting where it's too late. So allowing companies to position themselves advantageously before changes become obvious to everyone else. You want to be proactive. You want the competitors to be following you. And I always remember a great story from Jim Gennard Oakley, one of the great visionary leaders I worked for. Jim never worried about the competition, didn't want to hear about the competition. He challenged our internal design team and product team to build the greatest products in eyewear and sunglasses on the planet. And it's okay if others follow us, but we're the leader and people anticipate when Oakley is going to have a new release because they know it's unique. They know it's a technology that we created, and it's going to leapfrog us ahead of our competition. So the customer-centric approach goes deeper than simply providing a good service or a great product. It means building genuine, authentic relationships with customers that create switching costs beyond price comparison. So companies like Patagonia have such a strong brand loyalty. You've probably all seen Patagonia's product, but maybe not a lot of you heard of Yvon Chouinard, the leader and the visionary behind Patagonia, and how passionate he was about our environment. Thank God he was. There's national parks that are for the better because of him and because of Patagonia. And they built such a strong brand loyalty that customers become advocates. That's what you want. You want people to not just buy your products. You want them to be and live your products. And I go back to Ralph Lauren. Great comment. And it's so true with Ralph, is that we're selling a lifestyle, not a product. What a great quote. And remember that as a company, as a brand, especially you CPG companies. Ensure that you're selling that lifestyle and not just a product. And so in order for you to have this intelligence, what are some best practices for you to implement or at least take a look at? Number one is conduct quarterly customer satisfaction needs assessments. And it's a mouthful, but really what you're trying to do is ask your community, how are we doing? You may think you're doing great, but you may be surprised what they put on the scorecard. You may have an A, but they may feel like you deserve a D. And this is the customer lifecycle journey. This is not only through purchase, it's through acquisition and post-acquisition. What are you doing for your customer beyond product? Why should they stay with you as a brand or a service? The next is maintain direct relationships with key customers at multiple organization levels. And this mainly goes to retail distribution, but you need to make sure that you have a relationship beyond your buyer. Number three is monitor competitor activities through competitive intelligence gathering. So, we always said never put competitors' products in the design room. Put adaptive technologies in the design room, things that we can utilize that will make our products better, more effective, and provide a better service to our customers. So you want to be defining competitor intelligence on product, sales, whatever it happens to be, but you want to make sure with the use of AI today, there's no excuse for any brand not to be effective with market intelligence, so utilize it. And also track industry trends through trade publication, conferences, expert networks, whatever it happens to be, pick one. Don't go overboard with this. It's just something you need to be in touch with within your industry if you are within an industry. The next is analyze customer behavior data to predict future needs and preferences. So this becomes like Pantone color, seasonal color palettes, whatever it happens to be, predicting future needs and preferences. Make sure you have that under your belt as well. So this is really kind of a consumer adaptation of it's going to be coming down the pipeline, and then offering that up to your customers as an anticipation of new product offerings. Apple does this all the time with the color of their iPhones. iPhones, their MacBooks, their MacBook Airs, their whatever it happens to be, they put color in there because they're anticipating future needs and preferences of customers. They don't want to have just black computers. They know it's an additional point of difference and a selling point for their products. And the second to last here is develop early warning system for market disruption signals, meaning that if you see something out there, especially with the advent of implementation of AI, if there's something on the horizon a storm brewing out there that you see is going to disrupt your industry, assume that it's going to happen and take corrective action right away. Or ensure that you are taking some action to see how disruptive it really is. And the last is create customer advisory boards for strategic input and validation. Just pick a few customers. Many brands have thousands of advocates. Many have 10, many have 5. I say, just pick one that's being very proactive in your community, that's actually had useful information and feedback for your team, and put them on an advisory board with you. Now with Zoom, with AI, whatever it happens to be, it makes our life a lot easier. So again, this market intelligence, AI's made our life a lot easier. And I'm working with brands right now in the consumer products industry, iconic brands, that we're pulling together this market intelligence platform based off of AI. And really, the intervention of humans in this has been almost eliminated. So it's something that you really need to do. Just make sure you're doing it. And the fourth pillar is operational excellence. And I love this one because many people don't look at this. They like the beauty on the brand, the product, the design, the marketing. But it all comes together with operational excellence. And the fourth pillar, the operational resilience, requires building systems that can scale efficiently during growth and contract slowly during downturns. Easier said than done, right? But you need to have a system in place. And I've seen so many brands where it seems so simple, but they overcomplicate it and or they never even look at executing it or implementing it. So this involves creating processes that are both standardized enough to ensure quality and consistency, I get it, yet flexible enough to adapt quickly when circumstances change. Don't be this ship out in the middle of the ocean that takes 20 minutes to turn. Be this cigarette boat out in the middle of the ocean that can turn on a dime and has speed and can process. So make sure that these systems that you have in place aren't part of the problem. They're part of the solution. So the most resilient companies have learned to balance this efficiency and redundancy. And they're maintaining backup systems, alternative suppliers, and sourcing. And they've cross-trained employees who can step into different roles when needed. That's really effective as well. So make sure you're looking at all these things. So supply chain resilience has become particularly critical over the years. And it's always been important, but it's even more critical now because really it's the thread that pulls the entire company and brand together. As global disruptions have highlighted, these vulnerabilities of just-in-time inventory systems, single-source dependencies have killed companies. So smart companies are now building supply chain diversity while leveraging technology to maintain visibility across their entire network of suppliers and partners. And again, I say we're implementing this with our brands in addition to the methodology that we're using for market intelligence. This is one thing that every one of them has felt AI is going to allow them to be more effective and more efficient. So what are some operational resilience elements? Let's take a few here. So the first is a diversified supplier or sourcing base with qualified alternatives for critical, I'm going to say components, assuming you're a CPG product brand or building a product, whatever it happens to be. This could be a service where you need backup, data storage, whatever it happens to be, but you're diversifying your supplier and sourcing base. And this seems logical to a lot of people, but I put it up on the board and ask this question and I go, what redundancy do you have in suppliers? And they'll look at me cross-eyed. Well, what do you mean? We have this supplier in Vietnam and, we're only at 70% capacity and our forecast will move us up to 85% by the end of the year, but we still have 15% excess in case we need more product. Well, I said, well, what if that supplier goes down and we get, and I get stares, blank stares. I go, you need redundancy in your supplier and sourcing base. And the second is cross-training programs that develop multi-skilled employees. Virtually no brand does this or company does this. And it's cross-training. People go, oh, God, cross-training. It doesn't take a lot. And really, it's better to know something better than it is to know nothing. So where people get caught up on this is, and where we correct them, leaders, is we say, you don't need to teach them everything, teach them something. Employees are very adaptive, but you can't throw them into an environment they've never seen before. I said just showing them documentation, showing them, or sitting in on a meeting, or sitting in a review or a phone call, it makes all the difference in the world. They've been in the environment. The third is documented processes that can be quickly taught to new team members. More often than not, what I've seen when there is a problem, when there is a downturn in the economy, when there is a recession, and you have to cut headcount, one thing that the leaders have completely forgot about is you got a bunch of chiefs with no Indians. So you got people that don't understand how to do someone's job that had just left because they don't have anything documented. So you want to make sure that you're documenting processes that can be taught quickly. And the next is technology infrastructure with built-in redundancy. And this goes towards the service industry, but also goes towards any business with security measures. That's the other thing we have to deal with now as well is hacking. So we want to make sure that you have security measure redundancy as well. And the next is regular stress testing of operational systems under simulated crisis conditions. That's a mouthful. But I'm telling you this because when you get into situations where you have something that goes down, you just need to make sure that the redundancy that's in place, the backup, that it works properly. Just check your system. Make sure that everything works. The redundancy is operational. And the next is flexible workspaces and solutions. This is one, as a result of COVID, everybody's dealing with, is the work-at-home situation. So make sure that you have flexible workspace solutions and it's clearly defined in your operational playbook as a company. And support both in-person and remote operations and make sure they have tools to succeed in their role regardless of where they are. The last is quality control systems that maintain standards during rapid scaling or contraction. And I put this one in there because when you get into sourcing and redundancy with sourcing, you want to make sure one of the things that's always forgot about is QA. And as a result of that, when cutbacks happen, product goes through the pipeline without ensuring that QA has 100% tested the product or the service that you're providing. And it causes all kinds of issues when it hits the market. So you want to make sure your quality control systems maintain standards regardless of where you're at in the cycle of your business. And pillar number 5 is innovation and what I call future readiness. And this one is the most challenging to implement because it requires investing time and resources and activities that may not pay off for years. So you got to have a long-term vision when you talk about innovation or disruption. Sometimes they happen quick, but more often than not, you have to be patient. Innovation isn't just about developing new products. It encompasses business model innovation, process innovation, and improvements, strategic partnerships that position the company for future opportunities. So all these things need to be defined and put in place in their future readiness. And the reason it's the most challenging is because it's the most frustrating. You don't see results right away, but you need to be prepared for the future. And you also need to make sure that your innovation pipeline is something that's continually being surfed. And this is a problem that I see with Apple is that how long are you going to surf the iPhone? You need to build a new disruptive product, something that's going to change your industry. I understand the whole services platform. I get it. But your majority of your revenue streams are through the iPhone and I'm going to say not disruptive anymore. It's one that's incremental improvements that you're betting your entire company on without anything else in the pipeline. So that's what this is. Future-ready companies cultivate a culture of experimentation where calculated risks are encouraged, failure is treated as learning. That's a beautiful way to run a company, by the way. They allocate specific percentages of their resources to exploration and innovation, treating it as essential rather than optional. And as a great example is Google's famous 20% time policy, which led to the development of Gmail and AdSense, exemplifies this report to systematic innovation. Those of you who haven't heard about it is that they just say 20% of your time needs to be dedicated to just simply thinking. It's really idea generation. It's beautiful if you think about it. I mean, very few companies, again, if anybody does this. So think about that, is that 20% of their time to learning, 20% of their time to thinking, 20% of their time to idea generation, 10% of your time to concept design. So it's all of these different things, but they're all future readiness and innovation and adaptation. And hopefully sometimes it leads to disruption, which is the ultimate innovation. So what are some strategies for implementing in your company innovation and future readiness strategies? I'm going to give you full bullet points here. So allocate 10 to 15% of resources to experimental projects and new opportunity exploration. Yeah, I know it's hard. And, probably get a lot of, they're already overburdened, but really what you're doing is you're freeing their time. And they would look forward to doing these things. I don't care if it's accounting, operations, sales, marketing, product, whatever it happens to be. Don't just think this one's department. Everybody's working together. And if you make a 5% efficiency increase in the accounting process, you don't think that's saving you money and time in the future? Those are all things you need to think about when you think about allocating resources to experimental projects. Number 2 is establish partnerships with startups. Universities, research institutions, whatever you want to be. But you need a refresh. You need a reset button with your company and your brand, new ideas that come through the pipeline. So establish some partnerships outside of your four walls. Don't think you have all the ideas, because you don't. The next is create internal innovation labs or incubators for testing these new concepts. So many times these companies and brands that we work with, we establish these incubators, we call them, inside of big brands, because they don't want to disrupt their current workforce. And that's where this point number 2 comes in handy. If you got partnerships with startups, universities, or research institutions, that's where this collaboration comes from. When you create this internal innovation labs. Internal innovation and incubators typically don't work unless they're off-site, separate building. People aren't touching them. They're not playing with the throttle, the gas pedal, the brake. You need to have independence with this. So that's really the key to this being successful. And Apple's a great example of this as well, where they had the Macintosh group off-site. Nobody messed with them. And they were able to create one of the most innovative and disruptive products on the planet. And number 4 here is implement regular strategy planning sessions that challenge current business model assumptions. So once you've gone through the process of ideation, we call it, at Liquid Mind, what we do with our brands and companies is that we create these startups. We create this innovation or incubator lab inside of the company. And it could be, I don't care if you're a 50-person company or brand, 100-person or 5,000. We work with all levels of brands, with Nike, Adidas. All of these brands have a need for innovation and disruption. They just don't take the time to do it. So this is where they find a strategy around doing that. And once you have that, that's where this 4th point comes in. Implement regular strategic planning sessions that challenge current business model assumptions. And 9 times out of 10, it can't be done with your internal team. It has to be done through these incubators. These ideas have to be flushed to get an idea if it's something that's viable and something you can commercialize and something that can disrupt your industry. And next, you want to develop scenario planning capabilities that explore multiple potential futures of your brand or company. So it's really a simulation of, hey, if we did this. So it's the if, what, why, when, and where of if we were to do this, where would we use it? How would we apply it? And why are we doing this? And is it good for the brand? So that's scenario planning, and it's simulations. And next is invest in employee development and external training to build future relevant skills. And again, I don't care if it's in more often than not, and just let me give you a heads up here on companies and brands and leaders that I work with, is that they often think about, well, design is the one that needs it. Product's the one that needs it. You know what? Accounting needs it. Operation needs this training. The customer service team needs this training. Everybody needs this training. Don't think of it as a department. Think of it as the entire company as a whole needs this training. to be a better brand and company as a whole. So let me give you a case study here. One is I was talking about Nike a little bit earlier. And let me give you a little bit of a case study, the resilience of Nike. And they really provide a great example of how these 5 pillars work together to create a lasting business resilience. It was founded in 1964 by, as affectionately enough, kind of story here. I'm reading the unauthorized book on it's called Swoosh. I read Shoe Dog and Blue Ribbon Sports. It was meant to be, hey, Blue Ribbon is first place, or you can interpret it as Pabst Blue Ribbon, however you want. Both stories have been kicking out there, but it was by Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman, the head track coach at the University of Oregon. And Nike had navigated multiple, not just one, multiple economic recessions during their buildup. Sometimes you can even see in the movie Air, where it was a situation where they were in dire straits. They didn't know what to do and potentially at the verge of bankruptcy. Intense competition, supply chain disruptions, and social controversies, while growing it from a small startup to a global powerhouse with over $50 billion in revenue. But, Nike's financial discipline has been evident throughout the history, really, particularly in its approach to its cash management, strategic investments they've made, and the greatest being obviously the Jordan brand. It was very controversial at the time to take a percentage of revenue on product, but look at where we're at today. And, Nike maintained and increased their brand investments. They gained market share as a result, and rivals really pulled back because of the power of the brand. They've consistently maintained strong cash positions that allowed them to weather downturns and capitalize on opportunities when others are constrained. So you look back on these pillars, we talked about having the cash position, multiple avenues and streams of revenue. In this case, Nike had Converse, Jordan, Nike, male, female, football, basketball, baseball. They had all kinds of revenue streams coming in. So if one turned down, the other will pick them up. So their leadership culture, established by co-founder Phil Knight and continued through successive CEOs over the generations since Phil left, has always prioritized innovation and really bold thinking over safe. Safe is risky, and this is a policy they had at Nike, and the incremental moves they made along the way proved out the fact that you need to take risk in order to be successful. And Nike's leadership understood that, early, they weren't just selling shoes. They were selling inspiration, aspiration, performance, and identity. Isn't that great? That's what we're selling. You go back to Ralph Lauren, we're selling a lifestyle, not a product. The vision-driven approach has enabled them to make controversial, but ultimately successful decisions, like the Colin Kaepernick campaign. Still to this day, very controversial. Initial backlash, but ultimately, it did strengthen the brand and some of their core customers. So from a market intelligence perspective, Nike identified athletic footwear could transcend sports to become lifestyle products. Remember a story was at K-Swiss where we said, hey, our best-selling shoe is a lifestyle shoe. If Nike comes out with a combo run lifestyle shoe, we are going to take a massive hit. And they came out with the knit shoe, fly knit shoe, and we took a substantial hit. So Nike identified athletic footwear could transcend that into lifestyle products. So they recognized the power of athletic endorsements before it became a standard practice. Again, signed MJ to a groundbreaking deal in 1984, created an entirely new product category with Air Jordan. When we talk about revenue streams, to this day, it's the stream that's saving Nike. They've continued to stay ahead of consumer trends, from the fitness boom of the 80s to athleisure that we have today. And operationally, Nike made strategic decisions early in their history, prioritized flexibility and innovation over traditional manufacturing approaches. And it's really one that helped them scale their business and satisfy the customer. They pioneered asset-light models and footwear, focused on design, marketing, brand building while partnering with specialized manufacturers that could execute their strategy. And finally, Nike consistently innovated, not just in products, but in how they connect with customers and define athletic cultures. Really, people in their community were loyal to them because of this. They revolutionized sport marketing with their Just Do It campaign, which today they're reinvigorating. They created entirely new product categories like Air Jordan, pioneered direct-to-consumer digital platforms. Their innovations in materials science were groundbreaking. From Air Jordan to Flyknit technology, they consistently set industry standards while supporting premium pricing. And many of these things have come from adaptive technology. The Flyknit technology came from bridges, truss bridges. Not a lot of people recognize that. So Nike's resilience was particularly tested during COVID-19 when traditional retail shut down. So they had previous investments, the foresight on previous investments in digital platforms and direct-to-consumer capabilities allowed them to pivot very quickly, actually accelerating their digital transformation, emerging stronger than their competitors because of the positioning and foresight that they had if there was something like a COVID shutdown. And they're less dependent today on retail partnerships with greater margin on D2C. So, what does this look like? So all of this, and thanks for bearing with me through all of this, but hopefully you found it useful. And so the last piece I'll conclude this with is the implementation framework. How do you build your resilience plan? So creating a business resilience plan is kind of a significant opportunity, but also a significant amount of work. And how do you build this requires a systematic implementation across all 5 pillars. And that's why I put all 5 in there for you. And by the way, simultaneously, to make it even more challenging for you. So first, you want to start by conducting an assessment of your current state in each area that I outlined in the 5 pillars. And once you understand the baseline, you can prioritize improvements. That's not a problem as long as everybody's working in unison and you've got a core group that's actually executing the implementation. And some of the areas that I'm looking at here would be just kind of like, hey, let's just start with a 90-day quick start actions. What does that look like? And so I put these together for you. It's 7 areas that you can take a look at in a 90-day quick start actions. The first is conduct a cash flow analysis and establish minimum cash reserve targets. That's number 1. Number 2 is survey top 20 customers about their evolving needs and your performance in their journey. Purchase through post-purchase acquisition, value beyond product. Number 3 is identify single points of failure in critical business processes. There's something that's hitching into your business that is 90% of the problem or 10% of the solution. Fix it. Number 4 is create or update emergency response plans for likely crisis scenarios like COVID. Something on a scenario planning simulation. If you see something, you can now simulate a COVID crisis with your suppliers if you don't have redundancy. That's what we're talking about here. Make sure that you're looking at that before it becomes a problem. And the next is establish monthly leadership team reviews, focus specifically on resilience metrics. And the resilience metrics are the 5 pillars. How good are you at each one of these? And making sure that you're honest in your opinion when you're doing that. And begin cross-training initiatives for key employees. And the last is launch one small-scale innovation experiment or pilot program for your design or product team. Start with design and product first. You can also, as I talked about, it isn't just isolated to those groups, which is most leaders think of. It's also accounting and operations, everything else. So when you look at these 90-day quick start action plans, again, the 5 pillars that you need to look at when you're building a resilient business is first, again, financial fortress, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is adaptive leadership and culture. Pillar number 3 is market intelligence and consumer focus. Number 4 is operational excellence. And number 5 pillar is innovation and future readiness. And then I've given you a 90-day test plan. So hopefully you implement that and you maintain that. And some closing thoughts are off of this podcast is building a resilient business is ultimately about creating really an organization that can thrive regardless of external circumstances. It's about developing the capability to turn these barriers, these obstacles into opportunities, emerge stronger in every challenge that you face with your business. This requires leadership. I get it. Not everybody wants to deal with this. They just want to put their head in their sand and be ostrich leaders, but that's not who you are. This requires leadership, courage to make difficult decisions, organizational discipline to maintain standards under pressure, and a strategic patience, yes, I say patience, to invest in capabilities that may not pay off immediately. And that's hard. I get it. The companies that will dominate, I guarantee you will dominate in the next decade, won't necessarily be the ones with the best technology or most funding. They'll be the ones with the strongest foundations, principles, and the greatest adaptability in leadership. They'll be the businesses that took the time to build resilience into their DNA, their day-to-day, rather than treating it as an afterthought. Again, remember, resilience isn't built in a day. It's a long-time commitment, but it's strengthened with every decision that you make on a day-to-day basis. Start today, be consistent, and trust in that process. Your future and your stakeholders, and I say stakeholders as your employees, your team members, will thank you for your insight when you come across these barriers, for your foresight and effort in investing and building a business that truly built to last. So thank you for joining me on the Visionary Chronicles again today. If you found today's episode helpful, please pass it along to those you feel might benefit from listening to the podcast. Please subscribe and share this episode wherever you can. And this really spreads between other business leaders who are serious about creating enduring organizations. I feel it'll be helpful for them. So if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy of my new book, The Visionary Leader. It's an Amazon business category bestseller, #1 bestseller. The Success Principles of the World's Greatest Visionary. It's available now wherever books are sold. It's a perfect companion, as I say, for those looking to really reignite your purpose or lead with more clarity in a very, very complex world. I get it. And as a thank you for those loyal podcast listeners and the visionary community, I'm pricing the ebook across all these channels at $1.99. So hopefully that's not too much to chew off, but I want to make it available to everybody. Those where they feel the impact will be most felt. And I see that and hear that every day from those that purchase the ebook or the hard copy, The Visionary Leader, or the Visionary brand, both. And I love the feedback that I get and how they've applied that to their day-to-day. This is a culmination of decades of research, experiences, and kind of real-world insights into what makes leaders like Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, and Elon Musk tick. I mean, how do they become visionary? And real quickly and lastly, I would say, if you could, and if you read The Visionary Leader or the Visionary brand, if you would be kind enough to leave a review on Amazon, it would be greatly appreciated. And the benefit to this is that it extends the reach to other leaders that may be impacted by reading The Visionary Leader or the Visionary brand. So your support means the world to me. I know your time is precious, and your purchase goes a long way in helping us spread this vision even further. So again, thank you for tuning into the Visionary Chronicles. I very much appreciate it, where the future is created by those who are bold enough to shape it. So until next time, keep innovating, keep leading, keep shaping the future. Thank you for your continued support, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great day and enjoy life.